Welcome to Ideas That Inspire, where uplifting stories spark hope, inspire change, and remind us that we all have the power to make a difference. Hello, my friend, and welcome to the very first guest episode of the Ideas That Inspire podcast. I'm your host, Emily, and I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. Today on the show, I'm chatting with someone I've been a big fan of for many years, Kate Fenwick from Wasted. If you've ever thought waste and recycling was a boring or dry topic, I promise you, Kate is about to change your mind. And after this chat, you'll never look at broccoli or corn the same way again. Kate is not your typical greenie. She's a waste expert like no other. She drives a V8, isn't vegan, and doesn't unwind with yoga. But what she does do is empower Kiwis across Aotearoa New Zealand to rethink how we reduce waste and take responsibility for the resources we use, whether at home, in business, or in our communities. You might recognise her as the resident waste expert on the TV show Eat Well for Less, as a spokesperson for Love Food, Hate Waste, or from her business Waste Ed with Kate, where she and her team deliver over 200 waste education sessions every year. What I love most about Kate is how she brings humour, honesty, and a whole lot of common sense to a topic many of us tend to overlook. In this episode, we talk about how she turned waste education into her career, why small changes really do matter, and how she inspires others to take action without guilt, overwhelm, or perfectionism. This conversation will leave you laughing, learning, and hopefully rethinking about how much waste you create every day. I actually came away with a sore jaw from all the laughing we did. So, if you're ready to be inspired to take action and make a difference, let's dive in. Here's my conversation with Kate Fenwick. Welcome to the show, Kate. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to talk to me today. To begin, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, your business, and what it is that you do.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. So my name's Kate Fenwick. I have been in the waste space for coming up 20 years, which is a bit scary. I started out as the nappy lady, which I was for many years, helping people choose cloth nappies. I'm still doing that now. It's like I've done hundreds or thousands of those now. And we do food waste workshops, waste-free living workshops. Yeah, a period program where it's everything to do with rubbish. We literally just talk rubbish full time these days. And I still love my job. I'm not perfect at all. I always tell people I drive a V8. Never going to own an electric car, whole nother conversation. But yeah, I've just been want to live my best life, but not leave a giant footprint behind me. And that's what I try and inspire other people to do as well.
Thank you. It's great to kind of hear how honest you are about the way that you live and you're doing your best, but, we don't have to be perfect.
It's too hard to be perfect. Why would you want to be perfect when you can just live like we all want to live? I think climate anxiety and things like that depress people these days. And it's, I suppose, the thing that settled for me and what made me passionate about educating others was just that as I learned more about the waste situation, and I certainly don't specialise in climate change, but as I learned about the waste situation, I started realising as a new parent, I was bringing the next generation on. And just in my lifetime, it's gone from literally no packaging when I was a kid, like very few things were packaged. And if they were, it was generally in paper or cardboard, to now, like you walk into a supermarket or any shop and just about everything is packed in a single-use piece of plastic. There's bottled water, there's takeaway coffee cups and all these products that never existed 20, 30 years ago. And so in our lifetime, things have significantly changed. So I've become more and more, I used to be very PC and now I'm not. So I like calling out the rubbish that comes out from brands. And I think that's the thing over the years, marketing changes and things, all these things have happened. And we sometimes think we're doing a good thing by supporting a particular brand, but there's a whole lot of greenwashing going on. and people are so confused and then they're anxious. And I'm like, you know what? All we can do is do our best as individuals to try and leave the planet better than when we were born on it, which we're not doing so great at these days. That's why I've got a full-time job for till I'm 80.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about you, Kate, that realism. And so interesting to think back to what it was like with the difference in packaging and how that's changed over the years. And to help the community just get to know you a little better, can you share your cultural background and how where you grew up shaped who you are today?
Oh, well, that's pretty easy. I actually was born in Upper Hutt, so I think that we moved up to the Bay of Plenty when I was 12, but that's why that I always say I'm a bit of a bogan because I grew up in Upper Hutt, that's where the V8s come deep into my heart. Yeah, I grew up there, moved to Katikati, did my college years in Katikati, and then, funnily enough, when I left school, I went dairy farming for a year. I loved it, but hated it. Then I worked in service stations. I sewed tents, actually, I worked for Doyle's for about 6 years, making the big 2-room tents. And then after that, my ex-husband and I brought the workshop he was working in, and I started doing the books there. Then I had my son when I was 27, and that's when I started my cloth nappy business, and then ended up selling that because I just wanted to educate full time. And now I don't have I don't like at the moment we've got people trying to book us in and we're like, how's August? And we're only just in March. So I can't say like I did do Toastmasters once and that was only because I had a TV interview and I was like, oh my gosh, stressing out. So I did Toastmasters and since then I then became a public speaker and I'm still sort of weirded out on how that all happened. But yeah, I suppose I'm a storyteller, and that's how I educate people is telling stories. So yeah, and I mean, in the last 3 years, it's changed massively with our social media, just making again more very upfront, confronting sort of stuff around waste and food waste and even cost of living stuff on our Facebook page, and it's just exploding, which is sort of cool but quite scary at the same time. So yeah, that's how I got here, but I still really don't know.
Yeah, quite a varied start to life and lots of different experiences to draw on. And then, yeah, seeing how that came to life through having your children and the cloth nappies and going on from there. So, yeah, you said you run events on waste education, cloth nappies, food waste, and reusable period products. And today I'd love to focus more on that waste education.
Yeah.
I believe that understanding what happens to our waste is the key to motivating change. Yet many people have no idea where their rubbish actually goes after it's collected.
Yeah.
Can you give us a bit of a reality check? Like, what happens to our trash after the curbside pickup?
Well, that's the thing. I probably the most impactful thing I've learnt in my lifetime was what is a landfill. Because I always tell the story around when I was a kid. We used to go to the Silver Stream tip with Dad, not very often, maybe once a year. And it was more like a recovery, like a resource recovery mission would be the modern term, where we would go and, we always went home with more than what we took. And that was part of my childhood and my memories of the tip. But I also remembered like the dozers just pushing dirt over the top of all the rubbish and thinking it all just must break back down into the earth because that's just the assumption. So as an adult, you get your bins, or we had the bags for a while, and you put your bags out and they just disappear every Friday, and then got the bins and they just disappear every Friday. And it wasn't until I went and toured my first landfill, was actually in Southland, and saw how a landfill works, but actually the quantity of waste was probably the scariest part. And then learnt that basically a landfill nowadays is not just a hole in the ground where they chuck some dirt over it and it breaks down. Landfills nowadays are designed like with liners and drainage for leachate and all the chemicals that go in from modern products. They have methane collections because of all the green waste and food waste we keep depositing in landfill. And essentially the liner in there is has to be guaranteed for up to 1,000 years. So our waste all gets transported there, it gets compacted so it's really, really airtight, and then eventually they seal it up and it just dries out and mummifies, and it's pretty much there forever at this point. Like they talk about, and I suppose this is where a reality check for me was when, like, disposable nappies, and I was doing my education on cloth nappies heavily in the early years, and they'd come up with these figures that's like, oh, just a disposable nappy will take 200 years in landfill to break down. And I'm like, wow, so you're going to use it for like what? Some of them like 30 seconds, some of them for like you might get 8 hours out of it, but it's all good because it's going to go to landfill and it'll break down in maybe 200 years. But we don't even know because they haven't even been around for 200 years. And so the first one that was ever made still hasn't broken down in the lifetime of that child since they wore it. So I suppose I find that sort of thing quite frustrating, and that there's, oh, this is expectation, when recently in one of the, like down in Timaru, they did some testing in the old landfill and it had been closed like 30 years ago, 35 years ago. This section of landfill had been closed, and they tested it to see what it was like in the closed section. Pulled out a sample and it had a newspaper clipping in it from 1984 or something that was fully preserved from being in landfill. And then the reason why they're not expecting it to break down any further, like it's all settled, because then they go and build a multi-million-dollar education centre on top of the old landfill. So there's no expectation for landfill to ever break down because they build on top of it once it's settled. And I think that's one of the issues these days is all these words like compostable and biodegradable. They use those terms for us as consumers to think, oh, well, that's okay then. If I buy it, it'll go there and break down or compost. But landfills are not a compost system, and they're not designed to break down or biodegrade products. Once they're in them, they're airtight, they're sealed. Everything's going to be in there forever at this point in time.
That's quite a reality check, isn't it? Especially thinking about, as you say, like the nappies, it hasn't even been 200 years to even think about what that's going to become in the future.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I've attended a few of your events, and that one thing that really stuck with me was learning that the rubbish can just sit in that concrete pit for 1,000 years unchanged. It blows my mind, and now every time when I throw something away, it really makes me think about that and think, oh, this is just going to go sit in the landfill for 1,000 years. Exactly as it is.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like everything you put in that bin or that bag, there's no such thing as away. It goes somewhere, and it goes somewhere pretty much forever. And that's our reality right now. And I suppose, like, I get a lot of people now, after they've been to my sessions, they're like, oh, it's like you're sitting on my shoulder now. And it's like, what would Kate say? Actually, one of my friends her parents came to one of my workshops recently, and she said, oh, I just spent the weekend with my parents, and the whole weekend they're just like, what would Kate say, Anna? What would Kate say? She's like, it's driving me nuts. But once you learn this stuff, you can't unlearn it. And that's, I think, where the power comes in. You learn what happens in landfill. You learn, incineration's a whole nother topic as well. But you learn about all these things, and then you realise that people go, oh, like, we're so powerless. But if you're putting out a bin every week, you have a responsibility because you are a waste producer. So we're all responsible for trying to minimise the waste because we don't have endless land to just keep filling it up with trash.
Yeah. Yeah, so now we understand where our waste ends up. What are one or two simple actions that people can take today to reduce their waste and to start to be a part of the solution?
I think the easiest change that people can make there's two. One is to recycle correctly. And I mean, I'll be honest, recycling is not the ultimate solution to our waste problems, but it's at least by recovering and reusing as many resources as we can by recycling, it's a good start. And the second thing is just really considering what you buy. A really simple change is to avoid single-use products like water bottles, takeaway coffee cups, straws, things like that. Always used to be something that you didn't always use, but nowadays they seem to be quite a like a day-to-day product. Like a lot of people buy bottled water just to drink water. I'd say to them, do a bit of research on microplastics. But anyway, we buy a bottle of water and think nothing of it when it's just another piece of plastic that we have to try to recycle, when you could just get a water filter at home, fill your bottle up from the tap, and then you avoid a whole piece of waste. And so there's little steps like that we can make just a simple change, like take your own container to get your lunch instead of getting another box from the sushi place that you throw away.
Yeah, so it really is starting to be more mindful about what you use that's just single use. And then asking yourself, like, is there another way that I could do this or buy this or reuse this? Yeah, we often hear that reduce, reuse, recycle. And as you said, the reality is that recycling alone isn't going to save us. Can you talk about why reducing and reusing really need to be the real priorities and how we can shift our mindset around waste?
Well, I think it's like if you go right from the top of the waste hierarchy, there's actually the rethink is the part that we're missing. Because it's the rethinking the way you buy, like rethinking brands that you support, rethinking the way that you deal with your household waste. I know things like modern products, and I always laugh, like they've brought back the solid bars of soap. And I mean, it's so like it's the in thing at the moment, but back in the day, like when my grandmother used to buy soap, they used to go and buy a slice of soap. Nowadays, we just buy a slice of soap in a box. But it takes it to become a fad for people to adopt it. Like even with things like using soap compared to a bottle of body wash, say, it's in a single use container. So by rethinking and using your soap, which again is never needed a solution, it still works. They jump into the shower with this body wash, and it's funny because when you look at the ingredients, they can pretty much have exactly the same ingredients in the bar of soap versus the bottle of body wash. The only difference is in the bottle of body wash, it's got aqua as the main ingredients, which is water, obviously. And when you get into the shower with your soap, the water is there. So you don't need aqua in your shower gel to wash. You can just use your soap and the aqua in the shower. Like it makes sense, doesn't it? It's just the rethinking of how we do things, and then it's the reducing. So don't buy things that you don't need to buy. Like, we're very consumerism based nowadays. We think we need things. We're very consumer based nowadays. So we really think we need things. We think we need to upgrade the TV because now it's LED or QLED or whatever these new ones are. So we're upgrading all the time. And then what happens to the old TV that's still fine and works perfectly well? Get rid of that one, put in a new one. Even cell phones, like they say, that's a modern phenomena. They make them so that you want the new one, even though the new one doesn't even have that much. Like they can't really get any better than what they are now, but it's designed to make us want them. And so we're very consumer based. We need the new, the updated, but in some ways technology has been a good thing. Like I was actually just going through some of my boxes the other day because we just put a set of stairs upstairs so I can finally see what's in the mezzanine floor. And I found one of my old video cameras and an old camera, and I was like, well, now you've got one device that has got rid of those two things, and it's also a phone. Like it's crazy, the technology. But nowadays that's a good thing, but we don't need the iPhone 2016 plus. We don't need to upgrade all the time when the same phone could last until it can't be upgraded again. Like I think my dad's still got an iPhone 7. It's going to break his heart when I think I tell him the 3G's not working. But anyway, he's made it last. But that's the previous generation don't generally upgrade like our generation does. We've grown up with the upgrading of everything, need the best, the newest, the now, the most up to date things, and I think technology drives that. But we've just got to stop and think of how we reduce our consumption, be it technology, even food waste, even just packaging, and then reuse the things we've already got. Like my grandparents' generation was amazing at reusing things. they didn't have like single use anything. A set of curtains became cushions, then became a dog's bed, whatever it was. The couch legs died, so they either got new couch legs or the couch just sat on the floor. They didn't just get rid of it to get a new couch. Whereas you can go sometimes when they're doing up, like even in a retirement village, when somebody is gone from the retirement village, they come in and they renovate the whole house, and basically all of that can potentially end up in landfill. Or somebody buys an apartment and it's got a really good kitchen, but they don't like the colour of it, so they just pull the whole thing out and then put a new kitchen in. Whereas the houses, you never used to upgrade the kitchen or renovate until you actually things were broken. But nowadays we renovate because we don't like the colour. Yeah, that's that reusing things. And if you are going to pull out the kitchen, sell it on Trade Me instead of dumping it. My friend actually brought a perfectly good kitchen and fitted it to his house, and it cost him a couple of grand when it was probably about a $30,000 kitchen. So reusing and repurposing things instead of just disposing of them.
Yeah, so many great ideas in there, and we need someone to come along to make all those things cool again. To make it cool to not have the old, the latest and updated newest thing, and to make it cool to have something a bit older and to look after it and make sure that we take care of it so it does last longer.
Well, and that's the funny thing. So Brody and Acacia, who work for me, they're right into op shopping, and Brody's into the vintage clothing. It's quite interesting. This, like, he's sold stuff for incredible amounts of money when it comes to vintage clothing, and I'm like, man, I should have kept all those t-shirts. It's good to see the next generation putting a value on vintage, but then why not put a value more on just vintage clothing? They say now, I think it's there's enough clothing in the world right now to clothe the next 6 generations or something ridiculous like that. So but then they're also the ones who are out shopping. Like, you go to the malls and it's all young people buying cheap, crappy clothing that you wash 5 times and it's out of shape. Like, there's no value. Whereas I remember when I was probably in my teenage years, and you'd buy a piece of clothing and it would last you. Like, I remember buying this Billabong skirt, this pink thing. I probably cringed now. It's actually probably vintage.
Worth the money.
Yeah, I should have kept it. But I brought that, and it was, I don't know, back in the time, like, oh, I sound like I'm so old, but, back when I got that, it was, I think it was like $25 or something, which was a lot of money. And I had it for 5 years, and it was perfectly fine. Nowadays, you buy something, you have it for 5 weeks, and it's out of shape and just literally rubbish. And that's where things have changed. That they talk about the whole fast fashion, and that's scary in itself.
It sure is. Yeah, we really are consumers, and it makes it so hard because they don't make stuff to last anymore because they want you to be buying more. And so, yeah, when you want to buy something that's going to last and is good quality, then it costs more, and it's kind of that sort of vicious cycle of
endless consumption.
Yeah.
I actually, for myself, like, I'm very proud of myself and my wardrobe. I tend to go and buy I try to buy New Zealand made where I can, but I buy maybe 2 or 3 pieces each season, like a skirt or, 2 tops or stuff like that. And I like, I hate those, like the H&Ms and shops like that, because I just walk in and I just see all the clothes and I just think it's all just rubbish. But in saying that, I did buy a nice H&M jacket, which was a lot cheaper than the New Zealand jacket. So that's where it's like, like every now and then, like, I'll buy something, but it feels higher quality than that. I would never buy a t-shirt or stuff from there. But I think in my time, because I valued clothes and I knew that if you buy good quality, you buy New Zealand made, then the expectation is that it will last longer. And so I only buy 2 or 3 pieces. So I spend a bit of money on those 3 pieces, but I save up for them, obviously. But I spend a bit of money on them, and then I have them for the next 5 years. So even when I'm doing my presentations now, like I think last night, I wore a skirt that's 5 years old, and I just had brought a couple of new tops. So I wore a new top, but that one will last me like next summer and the next summer and the next summer, because I look after them and I don't have fast fashion, so they do last.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, what you said. Save up for something, then you can buy something good quality that's going to last rather than having that kind of quick hit and getting something cheap.
Yeah.
Waste really is a shared responsibility from manufacturers to businesses to everyday consumers. How do you think we as individuals can step up and take more ownership of our impact and our consumer ways?
Oh, that's a great question, because I suppose there's lots of levels in that. A lot of people expect the government. In fact, I had a lady last night who was like, the government needs to do more. And I was like, well, do more of what? And they were like, well, stop these brands from packaging. And I said to her, well, that's great. So how do they do that? And she's like, I don't know, but they just need to find a way. But then the government, like, they banned plastic bags a few years ago, and then some other products like straws and produce bags and things. So they can go ahead and ban a product and go, right, you're not allowed plastic bags, you're not allowed plastic straws, you're not allowed plastic cutlery, all these changes that were made in the last few years. And so, okay, regulation happened, those products, no more plastic. So then what happened? The brands, because people want to be able to buy, they want to be able to have a birthday party and not have to do the dishes because we're so frickin' lazy these days. That used to be the social part of a party, but now we just want to get a black sack, have the party, chuck it in the black sack, put it on the roadside, and just go, oh, thank goodness that's done. And so when they banned the plastic ones, they've just brought out all paper and wooden ones. So they banned the plastic bags, now we've got paper bags. So they banned plastic because of the impact of plastic, especially in the oceans and the microplastics. But prior to plastic bags, we had paper bags, and they stopped making paper bags because we were cutting down so many trees to make paper bags. So they brought in the plastic bags. Now we've banned the plastic bags and we're back to paper bags. So now we're cutting down more trees to make more paper bags. They banned the plastic single-use cutlery. Now you can go and buy wooden cutlery that if you throw into the landfill, it'll be there for the same amount of time as the plastic cutlery. They banned plastic straws, so now we have paper straws. Like, because the consumer wants to be able to access those products, they'll find another solution that you can still buy to have the convenience that we want to, so that we don't have to wash the dishes after the party. So regulation can happen, but as consumers, it's not all the consumers' fault that we are where we're at in most ways. We could do better by not buying those products. But I think over the years we've begun to think that we need these products when we actually don't. But because we think we need them, we've created a demand for them. So therefore we've created the demand, so the brands will deliver, and then we keep buying it, so the demand still stays there. And so therefore it's supply and demand. So the manufacturers, like you could say, okay, come down from the government, the manufacturers need to do better, and they certainly do. Like, there's some things that are so unnecessarily packaged. Like, even just last week, I made macaroni cheese. I got the gluten-free macaroni was in a box with no bag, just a pure paper box. Fantastic. I can recycle it. The macaroni elbows that weren't gluten-free were in a soft plastic bag. So yes, I could recycle the soft plastic, except my supermarket's not taking it anymore. But I could have done that. But how two of the same but different products, one in a plastic bag that isn't recyclable curbside, and one in a cardboard box that is? And I'm like, where did that happen? It's like when you buy Nutri-Grain and you get this massive box with a third of the box is a bag, and then half of the box is cereal, and it says on the outside of the box, product may settle. Well, the bag settled and the box was too big in the first place. But how did Nutri-Grain settle? It was the same size as when they put it in. But it makes you feel like you're getting a bigger box of cereal, even though half of it is air. But then they'll say, oh, well, it's air because we don't want it to crush. It's like a bag of chips. You open the bag of chips, it's now like, I'm sure they used to be full when I was a kid. Now they're like a third a bag or to half a bag of chips. And they're like, oh, we have to have lots of air in there so the chips don't break. What a load of crap. And so, like, the packaging is bigger and the content is smaller. And so there's excessive packaging right there. So brands could do way better in that. But then us as consumers, we're the ones who go in and buy it. So we vote every time we buy something, we vote with our dollar. So if you go in and you always buy courgettes on a plastic tray wrapped in plastic, you're saying, I like buying courgettes on a plastic tray wrapped in plastic. Or you could just buy 3 courgettes without the plastic tray, without the plastic wrap, and then you vote for buying it like that. If you always go and buy a lettuce in a plastic bag, you're saying that's how I want to buy my lettuce instead of just a lettuce. There's all those little things that we often don't think about, but the way you purchase will determine how they will continue to supply. And probably the one that really annoyed me the most last year was when I saw Countdown bring in the half-cut melon pre-cut on a plastic tray where the lid is separate, so that can't be recycled. You've got the container with half a melon in it. It was $10.90 for half a rock melon, and then you could buy a whole rock melon with its own compostable skin packaging on it for about $4.99. So you're paying over 2 times more for half a melon pre-cut in a piece of plastic packaging. I was like, why are you doing that? And they're like, it's our top selling product at the moment. But we are then going in and paying that money, so we are voting for what we want to be available to us.
That's just wild. For those at home, I'm just cracking up. You can't see me. I love it. The ear and the chips and the plastic around the cucumber always gets me.
Yeah, and doesn't even keep it
Same
fresh.
as the melon. Doesn't really need it. It's got its own skin.
Yeah.
I love that. It's great to be reminded that voting with our money is one of the biggest things that we can do to change that supply and demand. Yeah.
Mm.
And just being more mindful and looking at different ways to, as you say, purchase different things. Often carrots, same thing. You can buy them in a plastic bag, or you can buy them and put them in your own bag.
Yeah. Or just no bag.
No bag, take them home and put them in the fridge.
Yeah, I always go into the supermarket and I don't use a bag. If I'm using a basket or a trolley, I just put them straight in there. I never get a bag. And then, but I've over the years, friends have said to me, oh, that's so disgusting. Like, why are you putting it in the trolley? Because they sort of feel like they're like, oh, I won't put the broccoli in the trolley because they need to put it in a bag so the checkout lady doesn't touch it. But the whole life of a broccoli is quite outstanding, where when it's growing, somebody touches it to cut it off. It goes to a pack house, somebody touches it to put it in a box. It goes to the supermarket, gets touched to put it on the shelf. Then as broccoli shoppers, we all know that we go in and we search for the biggest head of broccoli. Finally find it. Like, you've touched 20 other broccolis, but you finally pick up the big one and you feel like you win, and put it in a bag so the checkout lady doesn't touch it. Every person who's brought broccoli has touched that broccoli because you found it to be the biggest. So there were bigger ones that other people touched your one to find the bigger one. It's that mentality. I need a bag. Why? Why do you need a bag? You don't need a bag. You can just put it in the trolley and buy it. Because only probably 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, there was no such thing as a produce bag. None of the produce, they just came in big bins and you got what you needed, and you didn't, like, they might have had one big paper bag that all of your vegetables went into. There was no such thing as a plastic bag of carrots or anything like that. And now it's just like plastic everything. It's literally going to the supermarket and spot the unpackaged thing.
That's hilarious. I'm never going to think of a broccoli the same again.
I just make sure I wash my broccoli really well. Like,
I'm going to start.
Don't worry about the checkout lady. It was all the other people before.
She's the least of your worries. She probably washes her hands with hand sanitizer all day.
Yeah, constantly.
Have you got an idea, goal or dream, but feel stuck on where to start? Let's chat. In a clarity call, I'll help you gain fresh perspectives, feel truly heard, and walk away with a clear path forward. Visit ideasthatinspire.com to book your session and take the first step toward making it happen. Yeah, so Kate, you've been called many things: the nappy lady, New Zealand's waste-free warrior, and even a should-be stand-up comedian, as I sit here and laugh at what you're sharing about the broccoli. Do you find that humour makes learning about sustainability easier and more approachable? And how does that play a role in your work?
Well, yeah, it definitely makes it more palatable for people, but I'm more than happy to laugh at myself. And I have to admit, like most of my learnings have been my own behaviors. So then I can tell a story that's relative to me and my behavior, especially like in the food waste one. When I talk about food waste and I talk about the fruit bowl and the concept of how we develop a fruit bowl. And, we keep buying oranges and they just die and the black juice from the bananas. And then you've got the apples that we constantly buy to put in the fruit bowl. So we've got apples, but nobody's eating apples because we're sick of apples. And then the bananas get placed so proudly on top. And yet bananas are the only thing that should be in a fruit bowl. And that for me is like, that's from what I did as a consumer. That was my bad habits. We often say like there'll be lots of facepalm moments because we want people to come and go, yep, I do. Yep, I do that. Yeah, I do that too. And that is me as well. Because I think a lot of it nowadays is habitual, and all I've done really in a lot of my education is look at my bad habits, and as I've changed my habits, how do I tell this story so other people go, oh, I'm not, because I suppose I don't, when I started learning this stuff, I didn't want to, like I was told in a very technical way, and then it's really hard to digest because you're getting all these big words because people like to make themselves feel quite smart. And I found it really unpalatable. Like it was really hard to understand. And so I was like, how do I put this in a way that people will go, oh, that makes sense. Like that makes total sense. And I suppose it just builds and builds. And I must admit, my husband, we got married last year. I forgot to put him in my front part. He gives me great content, and I use him quite a lot in my workshops these days because when we first started dating, like it was a bit of a laugh. He sort of knew what I did for a job. He knew I was into, well, I was known as the nappy lady, but he knew I did a bit of waste minimization stuff. So he used to do his housework with a big black sack and just go around the whole house and just everything went in the black sack because he got told by his mate Tony that everything went to landfill and that was it. And so that was how he felt. So when I started dating him, I'd go around and the place would be tidy. The recycling bins were empty. So I was thinking, oh, he's a good recycler. But they were all in black sacks behind the shed, which is not somewhere that I ever went when we were dating. And it wasn't until we actually got in like lockdown and COVID together and started realizing he wasn't quite so good as what I thought. So, and then for me, like he now just delivers so much content for me because the stories that he doesn't like leftovers. So he always thinks that leftovers, it's too soon to have the same thing again. The latest one that he had was, I said to him, I had bread that I brought the day before, it was on the bench, and he was like, why don't you put it in the freezer? And I was like, well, because you just chuck it in the oven for like 30 seconds and it refreshes the bread and then it's like fresh bread again. And he's like, well, I'd rather have it out of the freezer. And I was like, so it could live in the freezer for 6 months and you're fine with that. You get that out and eat it because it was frozen fresh. But the 1 day old bread on the thing, I can't just chuck it in the oven. And he's like, no, I don't want to eat your CPR bread. And so I'm just like, excellent. There's another good piece of content. So I analyze my conversations with people and then I just think we're not really that much different in a general way of how we understand things. And I don't think anybody's really like they don't want to do something. There's probably a few people who don't really care, but I think most of us genuinely want to not leave a big mess behind us, but we just don't know, like we're just so confused. And so I use a lot of the humor to try and drive the message home in a way that makes sense, but also makes people not feel guilty because they're not alone. It's not just you. You're not in this alone. They say I'm not perfect. I'm never going to be perfect, but I've changed my behavior because I know things now. And knowledge is power. And I suppose how do you get it to sit with people? And I do find humor is probably one of the best ways to make it memorable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sounds like he didn't know what he was getting himself into.
No, but he tells all his clients now, he's a hairdresser. He tells all his clients how sustainable he is. It's fascinating. Like I go in and they're like, oh, Aaron was telling me about this and that. it's quite funny because he's actually really proud of himself. He's proud of me too, which is really lovely. He's proud of himself because he's made changes. He's still not perfect, but he now thinks about food waste, and I often get people going, "How did you make your husband get on board?" And I like, my secret is you just got to make them change one little habit at a time where they don't even know that you're working on behavior change with them. It's like just one thing. And so when we first started out and I was trying to teach him to just recycle, it was like, hey, don't put your cans in the rubbish, put them on the bench and I'll put them in the recycling. And then once that became the habit, I was like, oh, hey, look, the recycling bin is just outside. You could just put them straight in the recycling bin. And then he started doing that. And then it was the food waste. We got the food. I just had the ice cream container. And then because we had the food scraps bin, I was like, right, I just put it in the ice cream container. I'll sort it out. Then it was like, look, here's the food scraps bin. Put it straight in there. And then it's like, oh, look, and you can, and it just was a little bit at a time. And then I was at the salon probably, I don't know, 18 months ago, and he's telling his client all about, I'm so sustainable now. But he didn't even realize that it was just the small actions and the small changes. Because if you overwhelm somebody, and I often say to people, you can't become sustainable by Monday, like they come in to the workshop, they get all like, oh, I'm going to have a family meeting and we're going to sit down, we're going to sort it all out because now I feel empowered. But it's impossible to become sustainable by Monday. It takes small, very small steps of sustainable change. So I always say work on one behavior, so change one thing. It could just be coffee cups. It could be how you buy carrots. It could be just thinking about your packaging. It could be recycling properly. You find one thing, you commit to doing that one thing properly, and then when that becomes a normal habit, then you introduce the next thing. You can't just bring in a green waste bin and go, righto, family, now we're all going to do this from today and our lives will change, because the habit has been in the past to scrape the food scraps in the rubbish bin. So it takes time to change that habit. So you make it small, easy to action changes and then bring the next thing in. And then now I look back and I'm 20 years in and I'm like, wow, I am pretty sustainable.
Yeah, look at all the things I'm doing.
Yeah, and it's been easy. I haven't put a lot of pressure on myself and I still live. I don't feel like I'm missing out. But it's just mindful of purchasing and better washing machine next time and a more eco fridge, or all of those things. Now I might do a bit of research and find out what's better, because everything else is pretty sorted.
Yeah, I love that. Definitely even sort of breaking it down to what you think small and then even breaking it down again. Just getting them on the bench first then getting them into the recycling bin. So
yeah.
And yeah, I love the way that you're using the humour to laugh at yourself and then see that other people can do that too, like laugh at themselves and the silly things that they do and the habits that they have just because they saw their mum do it or their dad or their friends, and that's kind of just what they've always done without actually thinking about that there's other ways to do things.
Yeah, exactly. And it was actually funny last night at the food waste workshop. I had a lady there and I was talking about my husband saying, oh, it's too soon to have the leftovers again. And she was like, that's exactly what my husband says. And so again, like straight away, there's an instant connection there because our husbands are both not into leftovers, and it's just that moment when you can go, oh, we have a similar thing going on. And then you feel like you can relate with somebody else because you're not somebody standing over you going, you must reduce your carbon credits and you must like climate change and like it's too overwhelming. Let's work out a way to get your husband to not even realize he's eating the leftovers. That's a better thing. Like, let's work on that strategy as opposed to all being overwhelmed by what you can't control.
Yeah, the leftover seems to be, you're one or the other. I mean, I love leftovers because it means I have to cook less. So, I don't get it. But
well, the only leftovers my husband will eat is schnitzel.
Yeah.
That's it. Anything else, casserole, roast chicken, anything like that, no, not interested. It's just too soon. And so I'm like, oh, well, I'll have chicken sandwiches then. But it's funny that he's not the only one.
Yeah.
Generally, there's always somebody else out there who is going through the same thing or has the same belief system.
Yeah.
we're not alone.
Yeah, and that's so great that he can see the changes that he's making, because there are so many incredible people and businesses out there doing their part for sustainability. People embracing circular models, reducing their footprint, and thinking outside the box. What does success look like for you in your work? And what could success look like on a larger scale for New Zealand's waste problem?
For me in my work, success is when people turn up is a good thing. But I mean, it's really exciting. We've, like this year so far, we've had, our groups have been anywhere between 50 and 80 people, which is really cool to have bigger numbers again, especially since COVID. Success for me is just knowing that somebody walks out the door, not feeling that they're not alone, that they can make a difference just by doing some small things, and that they feel empowered to just try. It's not about being perfect, it's about all of us imperfectly doing small things to make change. And for me, that's success. Even when I get on and I make all my TikTok videos and you get some really very interesting comments from some very interesting characters, I'm quite lucky. It doesn't affect me because I think I've been in it for so long. I've heard it over and over and over again. Except the guy that told me that I needed to lose weight, stop eating and go to church, that was a new one. Never had that one before, but I just kindly responded. But at the end of the day, I think that's probably one of our biggest successes, is to reach more people and dispel myths in a modern social media platform. And what's quite cool is that the more people that follow us and, jump on board with what we're sort of trying to educate and sharing it, I don't have to defend myself much anymore because other people get on and just call them stupid. Because I think people are aware, and then just when you get these stupid comments and other people are just like, how can you think like that? But for me, I look at it and go, that's validation for why I keep making content, because people think like that. So I suppose that drives me to make more content. How do I get somebody who will not or doesn't see why it's their responsibility to wash their recycling? How do I get that person to realize it's their responsibility to wash their recycling? So that drives me along, and and we've got a lot more coming out this year. It's quite exciting. More on the proof of recycling, and that's, I think, a big bit that's missing. People, it goes to landfill. But we did the glass one last year, and it's probably one of the most successful. Definitely not the most watched video, but it's the most successful for putting it out there and people going, oh, that makes sense now. Like seeing the process, seeing the proof that a glass bottle comes back as another glass bottle. I think we need more of that. So that's our success for last year, which we're rolling into this year, which is awesome. From a national standpoint, I'm a little bit concerned, to be honest, at the moment, because the government has been making some changes to the waste funding, and they had actually had some mandated or regulated things that the councils needed to do in the next sort of 5 to 6 years, like in introducing food scraps bins and getting that out of landfill because of the emissions. But that got scrapped, and we're now seeing councils pulling away from having to do that. They're changing some of the funding to more infrastructure as opposed to education, which is a little bit concerning for the likes of myself, who's full-time educator. I might just have to become a comedian if it doesn't work out, and then I'll just go and do my own slot. But I think success in New Zealand would be people not just thinking that the solution is to roll out a full recycling bin every week, because just because you're recycling properly, like, I think that's the next step, is going, why do I have so much plastic that needs to be recycled? Why don't I look at reducing the amount of plastic and the amount of packaging so that I don't contribute to so much product needing to be recycled? That's the next step in the ladder. The first step is people actually recycling properly, because contamination rates around New Zealand at the moment are out the gate. Some of them are 35% contamination in the loads, which means the whole load ends up going to landfill because there's no value in sorting it because it's so disgusting. But I think that would be a first step. But even getting to the next step, success is not having as much to recycle because we're not buying it in the first place. So putting out your recycling bin once a month would be successful.
Yeah, that's a great idea to work towards. It certainly feels like a long, slow process, doesn't it? first getting people to prioritise recycling, then educating them on recycling properly, and finally, as you mentioned, rethinking the way we buy things to get to that next step of reducing what we actually put in the recycling.
Yeah.
And New Zealand has recently made big strides in simplifying hard plastic recycling.
But the soft plastics are still a bit of a challenge. They're not part of our curbside collection, like you said, and people have to go out of their way to drop them off. And in my household, what actually counts as soft plastic is a hot topic of debate. And we're always trying to get it right. I mean, do you see this changing in the future? Could soft plastics be included in our curbside recycling? And what needs to happen to make recycling them easier for the everyday Kiwi?
I personally hope that they don't get put into the curbside recycling, because when they get to a recycling facility, there's a lot of wind and they just blow round like the plastic bags used to. It's no different to a plastic bag. And also it gets wrapped around the machinery in the recycling facilities, which is quite hazardous. So, and it sort of doesn't stop there. Like people, they say soft plastic and then people think all soft squishy plastic. So they get bale wrap in there and they get all these different things ending up in there when it's supposed to be chippy bags. And I think that's the thing. I hope it doesn't get into curbside, just from the point of view that, again, it's a product we need to reduce the use of. But collecting them up, because you have to wash them, they have to be dry in order for them to be recycled, and you have to drop them off into the soft plastic bins. But they do get, well, I'm waiting to go and actually tour the plant, but they do get made into fence posts. And they also, the other company that use some of them is the Saveboard company that's making the walls out of the Tetra Pak. And I did actually tour their factory recently. And I mean, it's good that they're finding alternative things to do with it, but I still think there's way too much. There's only a very small percentage of those products that are actually getting, well, I don't call them recycled, I call them downcycled. So they're just basically postponed from landfill. I think a reduction of those products is far more important than finding a recycling solution for them, because there's nothing that's absolutely perfect out there at the moment. It's even with the hard plastics, it's still only 1, 2, and 5 plastics that can be recycled. The other ones are too low a grade of plastic to be recycled, or too impactful on the environment to be recycled. And they are avoidable in most cases. The 3, 4, 6, and 7, you can avoid those plastics in many ways. Compostable plastics just shouldn't even exist, and neither should biodegradable plastics. They're just all a load of rubbish. And I think we're doing okay, but there's still not a lot of solutions for, and there's new products arriving all the time that have no solution to them. And that's where the big talk around nowadays is the circular economy, where brands actually need to be far more responsible. They create product in the first place. So before it's even launched or even purchasable by consumers, then it should actually have the end of the life already connected to the start, instead of going, we'll create this, throw it out there on the market, people will buy it, it'll go to the retailer, the purchaser buys it, and then it goes to landfill. And that's it. Like, it just goes straight to landfill. There's no connection up to here, or there's no, like the soft plastics. Like, you have to be on board and choose to do it. It's not something everybody is going to do. So therefore, it's not a solution. And if the brands continue to create these products that are very hard to recycle or impossible to recycle, then there's no end in sight for us to eventually get to zero waste.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's great to get that perspective. And as you say, it's really more about limiting the soft plastics as opposed to finding something to do with them after they've been used once. But I do look forward to seeing your video about the fence posts. And yeah, your YouTube channel is full of fascinating insights. So I especially enjoyed the beer bottle swapper crate and how that works here in New Zealand.
Yeah, my husband enjoyed making that one.
Yeah, so I highly recommend everyone go and check those out. So throughout your career, like, what's one of the most surprising or eye-opening things that you've learned about waste?
I actually think, landfill's one thing, and also touring a recycling plant, but probably wastewater is one of the most fascinating things. And I introduced that subject into my wasted workshops because I just realised most people had no idea. They never think of wastewater as a waste byproduct, but it is. And there's all these brands over the years have called themselves flushable. And when I went into it, a wastewater treatment plant, oh man, it's vomit worthy. But they've got a video on it. We've actually just relaunched a documentary I filmed a few years ago, and we've cut it into a 35-minute documentary. And we tour a landfill recycling facility, do a food waste audit, and go tour a wastewater treatment plant. And it's just revolting. But my biggest learning from there is the things that people flush down the toilet, which is unbelievable, but also the fact that corn all ends up in landfill is one of probably the most fascinating things I've ever learned.
We don't chew it well enough.
There's just corn everywhere. No, we don't chew it well enough, and it just goes through and comes out the other end and ends up being scraped off and goes to landfill. And I was
I
like,
haven't thought about that before.
wow, good old corn, eh? So, but no, over my journey, I've learnt so many interesting things, and I suppose that's why I tell so many stories.
That's so funny. Maybe we shouldn't be eating corn.
Well, apparently it's good for your digestive system as it rolls through. I don't know, I'm not a dietitian, but it's got to be a purpose for it.
So is there a way for people to view that documentary?
Yes, so it's just actually, we've got it on, like we've just released it to schools, and we'll be releasing it to the public in the next wee while. If people who come to my sessions, we send them the link to the workshop, but we will be releasing it publicly in the next few months, so we'll have a link, but basically you'll just go to wasted.co.nz and it will be available once it's released publicly.
Oh, fantastic. I
Yeah.
look forward to watching that. Yeah, and for anyone wanting to dive deeper, you offer both in-person events and online courses. And I highly recommend attending an in-person event if possible. It's such a fun, inspiring experience and a great way to connect with like-minded people. Can you share what people can expect from your events and the courses and how they can get involved?
Yeah, we try to name them appropriately, like obviously parenting, cloth nappies and more. All about cloth nappies and sustainable parenting choices, reusable breast pads, all those sort of products. Then our waste, we call it wasted. I used to call it waste-free living, but it's really not. So we just went with wasted with Kate. That one's all about the journey of waste, the recycling, wastewater. Talk a lot in there nowadays about greenwashing, behaviour change, all of those sort of topics, and it's quite depressing, but you should come. And then the food waste one is probably been our most popular with the cost of living crisis. We're seeing big numbers coming to that because people are just in bad habits of buying too much food, and they say, I don't waste it, but their dog or their chickens are fat or their compost bin's full, and they're not putting two and two together and going, oh, I'm wasting food I should be eating. So that one's been a really popular course, but it is that face palm one. And then, yeah, we've got our online courses, which is pretty much the same content, but just structured slightly differently. So I've just actually re-recorded all three of them just recently, and we're about to launch those. So that's quite exciting. Yeah, we try to make it as palatable as possible, inspirational as possible, whilst getting people to laugh at me and laugh at themselves along the way, because I think that's just so important, is to make it easy to understand from a normal consumer perspective.
Awesome. Oh, that's cool that you've just redone them and they're ready for new people to learn and get inspired by.
We're going to promote them internationally this year, so
Oh, wow.
it'll be quite cool. Yeah.
Oh, all the best for that. So to wrap up, is there a key message or final thought that you'd like to leave the community with? Anything important we haven't covered? And where can people connect with you or get involved with WasteEd?
Oh, there's so many things I could say, but I think the most important thing, and one of our key taglines that I've been leading on for years, is just do one thing. It doesn't take all of us to be perfectly reducing waste. It takes millions of us to imperfectly do just one thing better. And just in New Zealand, it's like 5 million people here. If 5 million people use one less piece of packaging in one day, 5 million things change in one day. Whereas if we do nothing, nothing will change. So just encouraging people to do one thing, work on one behaviour, one change, and the big things start looking after themselves. And then, to get in touch with us, pretty simple. We've got a website, lots of blogs on there. And I've been busy writing all sorts of interesting blogs lately with heaps of free information on there for people. Just www.wastedkate.co.nz. And we've got our courses on there. We've got our online courses, got a few challenges that we're launching over the next wee while as well. And just trying to inspire people to jump on board and have a go.
Fantastic. Yeah, great reminder that we can just do one thing and that it does actually make a difference. Like having that thought about one person in New Zealand of 5 million does one thing and then we all do it. That's 5 million things. I've never thought about it like that. So that makes such a difference. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you so much for your time and being here today, Kate. It's been really fun talking to you. I could chat to you for hours and dive down so many rabbit holes, but I really appreciate your time and sharing your experience and ideas and thoughts with us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Kate as much as I did. Her approach to waste is both impactful and achievable. And I truly hope it leaves you with the understanding that small actions really do make a big difference. Remember to check the show notes for links to connect with Kate, find the dates for her upcoming events, and learn more about her inspiring work and online courses. In the next episode, I'll be chatting with Patrick from Ascent Refills, a business pioneering a circular model to reduce plastic waste and change how we consume everyday products like hand and body wash. Patrick's love for the ocean sparked his mission to make refilling the new normal. He'll explain why it's time for us to all embrace the buy once, refill forever mindset, and how we can all contribute to creating a more sustainable future to support our planet. I can't wait to share it with you. Thank you for being part of the Ideas That Inspire community. If today's episode sparked joy or inspiration, please share it with a friend, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. Because the more people that hear these stories, the more change we can create together. You can join the conversation on Instagram at Ideas That Inspire, where we connect, share, and support each other in living mindfully and making a real impact. You can also find us on YouTube, or visit ideasthatinspire.com to apply to share your story on the podcast, or book a clarity call to take the next step towards your own inspiring idea, goal, or dream. Let's light up the world together, one idea at a time.